Dollar. Dirt and money, no soul. Had to go and get it, ain't no time to kick it. Got a stack and flip for my foes. Dollar. Please tell me you can hear me. Don't turn your back and don't neglect me. Just let me know if you need me. Dollar. Let me watch out for my partners. Keep my money long, get my team strong. Let me run away from my problems.
You was good original crew. I swear I never asked for a background singer. I swear. So it's your boy DJ Nuki, your girl.
Sierra Cole.
We back on the channel with another
Kid is the original.
Ooh, still the better singer around this part. Hey man, we got 7 most infamous Alcatraz inmates of all time. Ever. I just
made that up, huh?
Don't do me, please, man. Hey, we already know Alcatraz is probably one of the biggest, most talked about prisons of all time. Besides the Colorado Supermatch, you know what I'm saying? Alcatraz is that one, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
So with that being said, hey, they say it houses some of the most crazy criminals of all time. So I'm trying to see who the most infamous
of all time.
Who gonna be number one? That's what I really want.
Question.
That's the question. Cause for you to be number one,
baby.
So crazy. So with that being said, before we get into it, make sure you check out the links in the description box down below. You already know where to go. If you want to further support, you can always check that information out down below. Also, we always gotta stop, pump the brakes. Salute to the comment of the day,
Salute
man.
to you.
We highly appreciate it every time y'all come around here, man. Y'all be spamming us up. Hey, we getting there with y'all, man. Also, if you enjoyed today's video, could you please lock it in with a thumbs up and let the algorithm know. Because they motherfuckers playing with us.
Facts.
But, again, 7 most infamous Alcatraz inmates. You ready?
Yeah.
All right, let's go ahead and get into it. Let's go ahead and check it out. Let's see what it's about, y'all.
From dangerous gangsters who terrified the Depression-era United States to a convicted killer who inspired an Oscar-nominated film, here are the 7 most infamous Alcatraz inmates. Before we begin, be sure to subscribe to They Will Kill You. Hit the like button and request any topics you'd like to learn about in the comments section below.
Alright then.
Number 7. George Kelly. Unlike other criminals on this list, George Machine Gun Kelly came from a wealthy family in Tennessee and had even attended college. Many suspect that his wife Catherine was the one who facilitated his rise to become public enemy number 1. She introduced him to a number of notorious gangsters and even bought Kelly his first machine gun. Catherine was an expert at marketing her husband to the public and underground circles. Many historians believe that she was actually responsible for building the Machine Gun Kelly image. The two were inseparable, enjoyed a lavish lifestyle, and thrived in a criminal world together. Kelly
was Machine Gun Kelly before Bonnie and Clyde? Cause I'm like, are they? Could
Good
Machine
question.
Gun Kelly be like, and her be like the first Bonnie and Clyde? You know what I'm saying? Cause I want to say when I saw that movie, was it Don Dillinger they ran into, or was Machine Gun? I can't remember, bro. It's been.
I have to look it up after.
formed a string of successful bank robberies in Texas and Mississippi, which some believe had been orchestrated by Catherine. To avoid capture, the couple would state hop, and they'd also dye their hair to conceal their identities. The duo was ultimately apprehended following the kidnapping of wealthy oil tycoon Charles Urschel. While on Alcatraz, Kelly was reportedly considered a model inmate by the warden, and he even worked as an altar boy. However, fellow prisoners described him as boastful and said that he was frequently talking about robberies and murders he hadn't even committed. Number 6. James.
How you talk about stuff you ain't even did, though?
Right?
Like, how you that boastful? You gonna talk about shit? I don't know.
Yeah.
Bulger. Unlike the other inmates on this list, James Whitey Bulger seemed to have actually enjoyed his time on Alcatraz. While writing to Alcatraz historian Michael Esslinger, Bulger wrote, If I could choose my epitaph on my tombstone, it would be, I'd rather be in Alcatraz. Bulger was unlike most inmates. He served his first long-term sentence at Atlanta Penitentiary, where he volunteered for an experimental CIA program called MK Ultra, in which inmates were given heavy doses of LSD as well as other drugs. Alcatraz would only be a stepping stone in Bulger's criminal career. After the prison closed in 1963, he served the rest of his term at Leavenworth. After his release in 1965, Whitey Bulger would become a major player in Boston's criminal underground. He remained a fugitive between 1995 and 2011.
What?
After Osama bin Laden was killed, Bulger rose to the top of the FBI's most wanted list. He was finally apprehended while living under an assumed identity in Santa Monica, California. He was given 2 life sentences after being convicted of 11 murders.
Yo.
Number 5.
Who the I never heard of dude before, and it's recent. Semi-recent.
I'm like, what?
Like, I'm
Yeah.
speechless off that one.
Roy Gardner. Roy Gardner may not share the same level of fame as other inmates on this list, but this is mainly because he worked alone and was never a Depression-era gangster, regardless. Gardner was a force to be reckoned with during the Roaring '20s. Much like the outlaws of the Old West, Gardner primarily targeted trains. He is known as the last great American train robber and was nicknamed the King of the Escape Artists. Gardner once escaped from a moving train. He also escaped the penitentiary on McNeil Island. In 1934, Gardner was transferred to Alcatraz, which he would later describe as the toughest, hardest place in the world. He was released 4 years later after his appeal for clemency was approved. Gardner would publish an autobiography called Alcatraz, The Rock of Despair, most of which he'd written as an inmate. It was one of the first accounts about life inside the infamous prison, which also mentioned some of the other infamous names on this list. Number 4, Alvin Karpis. Alvin Creepy Karpis, who reportedly earned the nickname from his sinister smile, spent more years on Alcatraz than any other prisoner. He was one of the leaders and the criminal mastermind behind the Karpis Barker gang. During the 1930s, the gang hijacked mail deliveries and robbed a number of banks before turning to the lucrative field of kidnapping. Aside from Karpis and the Barker brothers, Doc and Fred, the gang included around 25 other members. Karpis reportedly had a photographic memory and genius-level IQ, and even Fred
Most criminals do.
Yeah, I'm about to
Most
say
criminals
most of
are
them do.
like genius, because who would think of half of the shit they do, bruh?
Bruh.
Besides a genius.
reportedly had a photographic memory and genius-level IQ, and even Fred described him as super smart. As they carried out their criminal operation, the Karpis Barker gang would gun down anyone that stood in their way, including innocent bystanders. Karpis was the last public enemy to be apprehended by Hoover's FBI, and his arrest marked the end of big-name Depression-era criminals. During his 26-year imprisonment on Alcatraz, he would constantly complain about living conditions and fight with other inmates. He was eventually transferred to McNeil Island Penitentiary in 1962, when Alcatraz was in the process of closing. Number 3, Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers. The fate of Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers has been the subject of speculation and urban legends, but nobody knows for sure what happened to them after their daring escape from Alcatraz in 1962. They weren't particularly violent offenders. The Anglin brothers usually robbed stores after hours to ensure no one got hurt, and the only weapon they ever used in a robbery was actually a toy gun. They were transferred to Alcatraz after repeated breakout attempts from their previous prisons. In the past, Morris had successfully escaped from Louisiana State Penitentiary before being sent to the Rock. It was Morris, in fact, who orchestrated the escape after the Anglin brothers were placed in a cell adjacent to his. The men worked on the Alcatraz escape for 9 months. They burrowed through the rotting cement at the back of their cells with smuggled cafeteria spoons and discarded saw blades, using fake vents to conceal their work. They fashioned a raft out of 50 stolen raincoats, which they sealed together with heat from the steam pipes under their cells. They made decoy heads from toilet paper, soap, and a homemade cement mix, which they decorated with human hair. On June the 11th, the three men crawled out of the back of their cells, took the raft, and made their way to the roof. They climbed down the wall into the bay and set off to nearby Angel Island. The decoys were discovered the next morning during roll call. Many believe the men didn't make it, as the tide was 8 miles per hour and the temperatures were 54 degrees Fahrenheit. However, circumstantial evidence from the early 2010s suggests that the men had survived and that the authorities had covered up their successful escape. Number 2.
You still never tell me if you believe they escaped or not.
Well, that little piece of information is new. The last piece about the whatever.
I remember watching the movie.
I feel like I said, I did tell you last time, I said I feel like it's a 50-50. They could have drowned or they could have made it.
Give me more than a 50-50.
I kind of feel like at least one of them made it.
Okay.
I do feel like at least one of them made
I feel like at least one.
Yeah.
One or two. I don't think all three successfully made it, but I believe
at least one.
Somebody made it for sure.
Al Capone. One of the most famous gangsters of all time, Alphonse Al Capone, made a fortune during Prohibition-era Chicago by selling illegal liquor. At the height of his empire, Capone was making around $60 million a year. He wore double-breasted suits, diamond rings, and drove an armored Cadillac. Capone loved the attention he received from the press, which portrayed him as a type of gangster Robin Hood, an image that he relished in. He would donate a percentage of his crime money to charity and even opened up a soup kitchen in Chicago. In February 1929, Capone allegedly orchestrated one of the most brutal gangland massacres in history. At the time, Bugs Malone was one of Capone's main rivals. On February the 14th, 7 members of Malone's gang were lured to a Chicago garage, where they were gunned down by hitmen dressed as policemen in what would be known as the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Even though Capone was careful in running his criminal outfit, he was eventually sentenced to 11 years for tax evasion. His immense wealth enabled him to manipulate the system in order to secure a comfortable life for himself on the inside. That was until he was transferred to Alcatraz in August 1934. During his 4.5-year stint on the Rock, Capone was treated like every other prisoner. He attempted to bribe the warden on several occasions, but he was denied. Capone himself said at one point, "It looks like Alcatraz has got me licked." Number 1, Robert Stroud. Robert Stroud, better known as the Birdman of Alcatraz, was probably the prison's most famous inmate. Even before he got to Alcatraz, Stroud's violent temper had earned him quite a reputation. He got convicted of manslaughter in 1911 for killing a bartender who allegedly refused to pay for a prostitute that Stroud was pimping. After starting several fights and stabbing a fellow inmate at McNeil Island, he was transferred to Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary in Kansas. While in Leavenworth, he stabbed a guard to death in plain view after he was denied a visit from his brother. Stroud was sentenced to hang, but President Woodrow Wilson ultimately commuted his sentence to life in prison in 1920. Because of his violent outbursts and frequent threats against other inmates, Stroud was permanently placed in the segregation unit to serve his sentence in solitude. During his 30-year stint at Leavenworth, Stroud developed a keen interest in canaries and raised almost 300 birds in his cells. He even authored 2 books on canaries and their diseases. After careful study of their habits and physiology, he was transferred to Alcatraz in 1942, where he spent the last 17 years of his life. After the movie Birdman of Alcatraz came out, in which Burt Lancaster portrayed Stroud as a humane and mild-mannered person, many people petitioned for his release. Stroud was never allowed to see the movie, which earned Lancaster an Oscar nomination. He died of natural causes in November 1963. Thanks for watching.
Crazy.
I never heard of dude before,
I've
but
never
I'm gonna have to
heard
go
of
do my research on him for real.
Look, I want to go watch the movie.
That movie old.
I know. Oh.
He died in 1963. They made the movie. He didn't want to allow him to see it. You know it's old, bro.
Oh.
You like, I want to see that shit.
I'm on TV.
So you're going to be watching Black and White for real. Like, who are they now? Oh, I remember that. Is that fellow? Just looking at it. No. But with that being said, man, y'all spam us up in the comment section down below. Let us know which one might be the craziest one for you. I think that number 1 is the craziest one.
Because it was new, too.
Yeah, it's a new guy we never heard of, man. Y'all let us know how y'all think in the comment section. But as always, y'all know how it go, man. I do go by the name DJ and Kid This Is.
Sierra Nicole.
We are.
Kid and C.
We are, y'all.
Ain't no time to kick it, got a stack of flip for my folks. Dollar.